Dr. Zixtela pressed her 6 fingers against the cold metal door. The ancient human bunker stretched deep into the dead planet's surface. Her team had been digging on Earth for 3 months now. Most other scientists thought she was crazy for coming here. "Doctor, we should leave this place," said Velther, her assistant. His blue skin looked pale in the dim light. "The council banned all research on human sites. If they find us here, They will not find us," Zixtela said. She pushed the heavy door open. It made a loud grinding sound that echoed through the empty halls. Besides, humans have been dead for 300 years. What harm can old bones do? The bunker was huge. The walls were made of some kind of metal that did not rust or break down. Human writing covered the walls, but most of it was too faded to read. Zixtela's equipment showed that the air inside was still clean somehow. The humans had built this place to last forever. They walked deeper into the bunker. Their lights showed empty rooms filled with old machines and computers. Everything was covered in dust, but nothing had broken down completely. The humans had been very good at building things that lasted. "Look at this," Velther said. He pointed to a wall covered in pictures of humans in military clothes. "These must be their warriors." Zixtela studied the pictures. The humans in them looked strong and determined. Their eyes held something that made her feel uncomfortable. She had read about humans in the old records, but seeing their faces was different. These beings had fought wars across their entire planet for thousands of years. No other species had such a long history of constant fighting. "The records say humans were the most dangerous species the galaxy ever knew," she said quietly. "But I think the records were wrong about many things." They kept walking until they reached a large room at the end of the bunker. The room was different from the others. It was clean and bright. Machines hummed quietly along the walls. In the center of the room sat a large metal box with windows on top. "What is that?" Velther asked. Zixtela walked closer to the box. Through the windows, she could see something inside. Her heart began to beat faster. "It is a preservation chamber. The humans called it cryo-sleep." She pressed her face against the window and looked inside. A human male lay inside the chamber. He looked like he was sleeping. His skin was pale but healthy. His hair was short and dark. He wore some kind of military uniform with many patches and symbols on it. "Is it alive?" Velther whispered Zixtela. "Check the machines connected to the chamber." Green lights blinked steadily. Numbers moved across small screens. "Yes, he is alive. The chamber has kept him alive for over 300 years. She found a control panel next to the chamber. It was covered in human writing, but her translator could read most of it. The screen showed information about the human inside. His name was Jake Morrison. He was 32 years old when they put him in the chamber. He had been a captain in something called Special Forces. "We need to leave now," Velther said. His voice shook with fear. "If the council learns that a human still lives, they will destroy this entire planet again." But Zixtela could not stop staring at the sleeping human. She had spent her whole life studying dead species. She had never found one that was still alive. This was the discovery of a lifetime, a living human, the last of his kind. "Think about what we could learn," she said. Humans were the only species that ever made the entire galaxy afraid. The council had to unite every major power just to destroy them. What made them so dangerous? What made them so special? "They were monsters," Velther said. "The history books say they killed billions of their own kind. They fought wars that lasted for decades. They created weapons that could destroy entire planets. But they also created beautiful art and music," Zixtela sighed. "They wrote stories that other species still read today. They loved their families and died to protect them. They were not just monsters. They were something more complex." She began connecting her equipment to the human preservation chamber. Her machines could interface with the old human technology. It would take time, but she could wake him up safely. "What are you doing?" Velther stepped back toward the door. "I am going to revive him. That is madness. You do not know what he will do when he wakes up. He could kill us both." Zixtela looked at her assistant. Velther was a good scientist, but he was also afraid of everything. Look at him, he is one being, we are two. Our ship has weapons and shields. What could one human do to us? Velther shook his head. I am leaving. I will not be part of this. Then go, Zixtela said. But I am staying. This is too important to walk away from. Velther left the room quickly. Zixtela heard his footsteps echoing through the bunker as he ran back to their ship. She did not care. She had work to do. The revival process would take several hours. She had to slowly warm the human's body and restart all his biological functions. It was dangerous. Many things could go wrong. But her equipment was the best in the galaxy. If anyone could do this safely, it was her. While the machines worked, she read through the human's military records. Jake Morrison had fought in 7 major conflicts on Earth. He had won dozens of medals for bravery. His record showed that he had never lost a battle. He had saved hundreds of other soldiers during his career. The records also showed something else. Jake Morrison had volunteered for an experimental program just before Earth's destruction. The human military had been working on ways to preserve their best soldiers in case of disaster. They knew the galaxy was coming for them. They had tried to save some of their people for the future. As the hours passed, the human's body began to respond. His heart started beating stronger, his brain activity increased. Color returned to his skin. The machines showed that everything was working correctly. Finally, the revival process was complete. Zixtela watched as Jake Morrison's eyes opened slowly. He blinked several times and tried to focus on her face. His mouth moved, but no sound came out at first. Water, he finally whispered. Zixtela gave him a cup of clean water. He drank it slowly, studying her face the whole time. His eyes were sharp and intelligent. Even after sleeping for 300 years, he was already analyzing the situation. Where am I? He asked. His voice was stronger now. You are on Earth, in the military bunker where we found you. Jake tried to sit up. The movement was difficult after so much time asleep, but he managed it. How long was I out? Zixtela hesitated. This would be the hardest part. 312 years. Jake stared at her for a long moment. Then he looked around the room, taking in every detail. You are not human. No, I am Colonian. My name is Dr. Zixtela. What happened to my people? Jake asked quietly. There was no easy way to say it. They are gone. The Galactic Council destroyed Earth and all human colonies 307 years ago. As far as we know, you are the last human alive. Jake Morrison closed his eyes and was silent for a very long time. When he opened them again, something had changed. The look in his eyes was harder now, colder. Tell me about this Galactic Council. He said. And Zixtela realized that she might have made a terrible mistake. Jake Morrison sat in the medical bay of Dr. Zixtela's research ship. The Wanderer was not a large vessel, but it was comfortable. For the past 3 weeks, he had been learning about the galaxy that had killed his people. The doctor had given him access to historical records, news files, and military reports. What he read made his blood run cold. The galaxy had not just destroyed humanity. They had erased every trace that humans had ever existed. No monuments, no museums, no records of human achievements. It was as if 3 billion years of human evolution had never happened. Your species frightened them, Zixtela explained as she checked his vital signs. Humans adapted too quickly. You learned too fast. In just 2,000 years, you went from using stone tools to traveling between stars. Other species took 50,000 years to do the same thing. Jake studied the data on his tablet. The current rulers of the galaxy were called the Hegemony Coalition. 3 major species controlled everything. The Vorthan Empire ruled through brute force and massive fleets. The Kretak swarm used numbers and hive mind tactics. The Luminari collective controlled energy and technology. What about the smaller species? Jake asked. They serve the coalition. Some by choice, most by force. The galaxy has not seen a major war in 200 years. Everyone knows their place and stays there? Jake frowned. No wars means no innovation. No innovation means they have gotten soft. Soft? Zixtela tilted her head. Her species showed confusion by changing the color of their skin slightly. Weak. Comfortable. When people do not have to fight for survival, they forget how to fight at all. Jake set down his tablet and walked to the window. Outside, stars moved slowly past as the ship traveled through space. Show me some of their military tactics. Zixtela brought up holographic displays of recent coalition training exercises. Jake watched carefully as virtual fleets moved in. Perfect formations. Every ship knew exactly where to go. Every attack followed the same pattern. Everything was planned down to the smallest detail. This is not tactics, Jake said after watching for an hour. This is choreography. They are dancing, not fighting. But look how organized they are. Look how perfectly they work together. Perfect organization only works when everything goes according to plan. What happens when something unexpected occurs? Jake pointed to a section of the display. Look here. If one ship in this formation gets damaged, the entire formation stops. Working, they have no flexibility. Zixtela studied the display again. She had never thought about military tactics this way. How would humans do it differently? Jake smiled for the first time since waking up. Humans never did anything the same way twice. We adapted. We improvised. We used whatever we had available and found ways to make it work. He gestured at the hologram. These aliens fight like machines. Humans fought like humans. Their conversation was interrupted by alarms throughout the ship. Red lights flashed and a warning voice spoke in several alien languages. Velther S. Voice came over the communication system. Doctor, we have a problem. 3 Kretak raider ships just dropped out of hyperspace. They are demanding we surrender our cargo and research data. Zixtela rushed to the bridge with Jake following close behind. The main screen showed 3 insect-like ships approaching fast. They were smaller than the Wanderer, but they carried heavy weapons. The Kretak were known for their aggressive tactics and willingness to destroy anything that resisted them. What is standard procedure? Jake asked. We surrender, Velther said without hesitation. We give them what they want and hope they let us live. The Kretak do not negotiate. You just give up? Without even trying to fight? Fight with what? Zixtela spread her arms wide. This is a research vessel. We have mining equipment and sample collectors. They have military weapons. Jake studied the tactical display. The 3 raider ships were moving in a standard attack formation. They expected the Wanderer to stop and wait to be boarded. Their weapons were charged but not yet aimed. They were being careful not to damage valuable cargo. Do you have control of the mining equipment from here? Jake asked. Yes, but what does that matter? Show me how it works. For the next few minutes, Zixtela explained their mining systems. The ship carried powerful drilling lasers, explosive charges for breaking up asteroids, and magnetic grappling systems for moving heavy objects. None of it was designed for combat, but Jake's mind was already working. Here's what we are going to do, he said. Drop some of those explosive charges behind us, but do not arm them yet. Make it look like you are dumping cargo to lighten the ship. That will not work. They will see what we are doing. No, they will see what they expect to see. Scared aliens dumping cargo to run faster. Jake moved to the weapons control station. Then we used the grappling system to grab one of their ships and pull it into the explosion. Velther stared at him. That is insane. The magnetic field is not strong enough to move a ship that size. It does not have to move the whole ship. Just change its direction a little bit. Physics will do the rest. The Kretak ships were getting closer. Warning messages demanded immediate surrender. Jake could see the raider crews through their viewports. They looked confident and relaxed. This was routine for them. Doctor, we need to decide now, Velther said. His voice was high with panic. Zixtela looked at Jake, then at her assistant, then back at Jake. Do it. Jake's hands moved quickly over the controls. He had never used this specific equipment before, but the principles were the same as human military systems. He activated the mining charges and released them behind the ship. To the raiders, it looked like cargo containers being jettisoned. "Now increase speed," Jake said. "Make them think we are trying to run." The Wanderer accelerated, but the raider ships were faster. They moved to surround the research vessel just as Jake had expected. The lead ship moved directly through the cloud of floating charges. Activate grappling system. Target the lead ship's port engine. "Jake, if this does not work, they will destroy us. If we surrender, they might destroy us anyway. At least this way we go down fighting." The magnetic grappler locked onto the lead raider ship. The Kretak pilot tried to break free, but the sudden pull on one side of his ship sent him spinning toward the floating charges. Jake waited until the perfect moment, then detonated the explosives. The lead ship disappeared in a ball of fire and debris. The explosion damaged the second raider and sent it tumbling out of control. The third ship tried to retreat, but Jake used the drilling laser to target its engines. Without propulsion, it drifted helplessly in space. The entire fight lasted less than 10 minutes. Valthor stared at the tactical display in shock. "How did you do that? We had no weapons, no shields, no military training." "You had everything you needed," Jake said calmly. "You just did not know how to use it." Humans learned a long time ago that any tool can become a weapon if you think about it the right way. Zixtala was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was different. "Hey. No wonder the galaxy was afraid of your species." "This was nothing," Jake said. "3 small ships with overconfident crews. Wait until you see what humans can do when we really try." Word of the incident spread quickly through galactic communication networks. A research ship had destroyed 3 Kretak raiders using mining equipment. Security footage showed an unknown bipedal alien directing the battle with impossible tactical skill. Within days, reports reached the Hegemony Council. For the first time in 300 years, someone had used human-style tactics in combat. The council members who remembered the old wars felt a chill of fear on distant worlds. Oppressed species watched the news feeds and whispered to each other. Maybe the old stories were true. Maybe someone still remembered how to fight back. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Wanderer and made a decision that would change everything. He was the last human alive, but he did not have to be the last human warrior. He could teach others what his people had known. The galaxy had made a mistake when they killed humanity. They had eliminated the species, but they had not killed the ideas that made humans dangerous. Now those ideas were about to spread. Jake Morrison stood at the edge of the Skarn labor camp, watching through electronic binoculars. Below him, hundreds of reptilian workers moved slowly between massive mining machines. Vorthan guards walked among them carrying energy weapons and shock sticks. The scene reminded Jake of old history books about slavery on Earth. "The Skarn have been enslaved for over 100 years, Zixtala whispered beside him. "The Vorthan Empire uses them to mine rare crystals from their homeworld. They work 18 hours a day and get barely enough food to survive." Jake studied the camp layout. Guard towers at each corner, electrified fences around the perimeter. One main gate with heavy security. The Vorthans had built this place like a fortress, but they had made it to keep people in, not to keep attackers out. "How many guards?" Jake asked. "Maybe 50 Vorthans total. But they have heavy weapons and armor. The Skarn have nothing." "The Skarn have something the Vorthans do not," Jake said. "What is that? A reason to fight?" They had been on Skarn Prime for 3 days now. Jake spent his time watching the patterns of daily life in the camp, when the guards changed shifts, where they stored their equipment, how they moved supplies in and out. Everything had a routine, and routines could be broken. More importantly, Jake had been talking to individual Skarn workers who came near the fence. Most were too afraid to speak to strangers, but a few were willing to listen. Their leader was an older Skarn named Krex who had been in the camp for 30 years. "The human wants to meet with you tonight," Zixtala told Krex during one of these conversations. "He says he can teach your people how to fight back." Krex's yellow eyes widened. "Fight the Vorthans? That is suicide." They have weapons that can kill hundreds of us in seconds. He defeated 3 Kretak ships with mining equipment, Zixtella said. Maybe he knows things you do not. That night, Jake slipped into the camp through a drainage pipe that carried wastewater out of the facility. The Vorthans never bothered to guard it properly because they thought no one would be crazy enough to crawl through sewage. They were wrong. He met Krex and 6 other Skarn leaders in an abandoned storage building. The reptilian beings were nervous and kept looking toward the door. They had never done anything like this before. You want us to fight, Krex said without greeting, but you do not understand. When Skarn rebel, the Vorthans killed dozens of innocent workers as punishment. We cannot risk the lives of our families. Jake nodded. You are right. Open rebellion would be suicide. That is why we are not going to rebel openly. I do not understand. Jake picked up a piece of broken metal from the floor. Tell me about the mining equipment. How does it work? For the next hour, the Skarn explained their daily routines. They operated massive drilling machines that could cut through solid rock. They used explosive charges to break up crystal formations. They drove heavy trucks to transport materials. Jake listened carefully to every detail. The Vorthans depend on you to make these machines work, he finally said. What happens if the machines start breaking down? They would bring in repair technicians, Krex said. What if the machines kept breaking down? What if every time they fixed one problem, 2 new problems appeared? Jake smiled. What if your mining equipment became unreliable? One of the other Skarn leaders, a female named Scylla, leaned forward. You want us to sabotage our own work? I want you to work exactly as hard as you always have. But sometimes accidents happen. Sometimes people make small mistakes. Sometimes equipment fails for mysterious reasons. Jake spent the rest of the night teaching them basic sabotage techniques. How to put sand in engine oil to make machines wear out faster. How to cut wires in ways that look like normal damage. How to weaken metal joints so they would break under stress. The most important thing is that it has to look like accidents, Jake explained. The Vorthans cannot prove you did anything wrong. They will think their equipment is just getting old. But what if they suspect us? Scylla asked. Then you act confused and worried. You tell them you do not know why the machines keep breaking. You offer to work extra hours to fix the problems. Make them think you are trying to help. Jake also taught them about communication. How to pass messages without the guards noticing. How to coordinate actions across different work groups. How to build a network of trusted people who could spread information quickly. Every successful resistance starts small, he told them. You do not need to defeat the entire Vorthan Empire tomorrow. You just need to make their lives a little bit harder today. The Skarn leaders were still nervous, but Jake could see something new in their eyes. For the first time in decades, they had hope. The sabotage campaign began slowly. A drilling machine developed an oil leak that took 2 days to find and fix. A transport truck had electrical problems that made it stop working randomly. Explosive charges failed to detonate properly, forcing work crews to restart their operations. At first, the Vorthan supervisors were just annoyed. Equipment failed sometimes, especially when it was used so heavily. They brought in repair teams and replacement parts. But the problems kept getting worse. Within 2 weeks, mining production had dropped by 20%. The Vorthans started investigating, but they could not find any evidence of deliberate sabotage. Everything looked like normal wear and tear, just happening more often than usual. Jake watched from hiding as frustrated Vorthan engineers tried to figure out what was wrong. They ran diagnostic tests on every machine. They replaced major components. They even brought in specialists from other worlds. Nothing worked. The Skarn workers played their parts perfectly. They acted concerned about the problems and volunteered to work longer hours. They suggested possible solutions and helped with repairs. They seemed like loyal slaves trying their best to serve their masters. Meanwhile, Jake was teaching them more advanced techniques. How to make time-delayed sabotage that would not activate until hours after they left the area. how to target the most critical systems for maximum impact, how to coordinate their efforts for the greatest effect. "You are learning to think like guerrilla fighters," he told Krex during one of their secret meetings. "You fight the enemy without letting them know you are fighting?" The Skarn were natural learners. Their reptilian brains were good at remembering complex patterns and procedures. Within a month, they had created a sophisticated resistance network that operated throughout the camp, but Jake was teaching them more than just sabotage. He was teaching them to think differently about their situation. Instead of seeing themselves as helpless victims, they began to see themselves as warriors fighting for freedom. News of the production problems on Skarn Prime spread to other Vorthan facilities. Similar mysterious equipment failures began happening on other worlds where different species were enslaved. Jake had sent Zixthala to make contact with other oppressed groups. Carrying his teachings to new places, the bird-like Ethron learned to sabotage aircraft and communication systems. The underground Molari began disrupting mining operations on their world. The aquatic Nereids started interfering with underwater installations. Each species adapted Jake's basic principles to their own situations and abilities, but the core ideas were always the same: fight, smart, stay hidden, and never give up on Centralist Prime. The capital world of the Hegemony Coalition. Government officials began receiving reports of declining productivity across dozens of worlds. At first, they blamed poor management and aging equipment. But the pattern was too widespread to be coincidence, Director. Vexstar of the Vorthan Empire called an emergency meeting with his fellow coalition leaders. "Something is happening in the outer territories. Our production numbers are falling everywhere." Equipment. "Failures happen," said Queen Zarthik of the Kretak Swarm. "Replace the machines and increase security." "We have tried that. The problems continue. It is almost as if ... Vexstar paused, unwilling to say what he was thinking. "As if what?" asked the energy being who spoke for the Luminari Collective. "As if someone is teaching our slaves to fight back." The room fell silent. The idea seemed impossible. The enslaved species had been broken and submissive for generations. They had no weapons, no training, no leaders. How could they suddenly develop military capabilities? But deep down, all three leaders felt a familiar chill. The tactics being used reminded them of old stories their grandparents had told. Stories about a species that had once made the entire galaxy tremble with fear. Stories about humans. The Free Species Alliance base was hidden deep inside the asteroid field that had once surrounded Earth's moon. Jake Morrison stood in the command center, looking at star maps that showed the current state of the galaxy. Red zones marked hegemony. Territory, green zones showed liberated worlds. Yellow zones indicated active resistance movements. The green zones were growing every day. "Admiral Morrison," said Captain Lisa Parker as she entered the command center. She was the pilot Jake had found 3 months ago, frozen in an escape pod that had drifted through space for centuries. Finding another living human had changed everything for Jake. He was no longer the last of his kind. "Report, Captain," Jake said. "The Molari have successfully taken their homeworld." The Vorthan garrison surrendered after their supply lines were cut off for 2 weeks. "The Ethron fleet is moving toward the Sigma Quadrant to support the Nereid uprising there." Jake nodded and marked the changes on his map. The strategy was working exactly as he had planned. Instead of fighting massive battles against superior forces, the Alliance was winning through coordination and speed. They struck fast, liberated a world, and moved on before the hegemony could respond effectively. "What about our new recruits?" Jake asked. "Colonel Harris has finished training the latest group of resistance leaders. Major Watson says her technical teams are ready to teach advanced sabotage methods to the next wave of liberation movements." Jake smiled at the mention of his fellow humans. Over the past year, they had found 6 more survivors in hidden facilities across human space. Each one brought unique skills and knowledge that made the Alliance stronger. But more importantly, each one was a teacher who could spread human tactical thinking to dozens of alien species. "Sir," said Velther from his communications station, Jake's former enemy had become one of his most trusted advisors after seeing what the Alliance was trying to accomplish. "We are receiving emergency signals from the Proxima Sanctuary system. The Hegemony fleet is assembling there in force." Jake moved to look at the tactical display. Hundreds of red dots showed coalition ships gathering at one of their most important industrial centers. It was the largest fleet movement they had seen since the war began. "How many ships?" Jake asked. "At least 800 confirmed. Possibly more. They have vessels from all three major powers." Velthar's skin had turned pale blue with worry. "Sir, this is not a patrol or security operation. This looks like they are preparing for a major offensive." Jake studied the display carefully. Proxima Sanctuary produced weapons and supplies for the entire Hegemony military. If the Coalition was willing to risk that much firepower in one place, they had a specific target in mind. "They know where we are," he said quietly. Captain Parker moved to stand beside him. "How is that possible? This base is completely hidden." "Someone talked, or they tracked one of our supply ships, or they just got lucky. It does not matter how they found us. What matters is what we do about it." The command center fell silent as everyone waited for Jake's decision. They all knew the numbers. The Alliance had maybe 200 ships total, gathered from dozens of different species. Most were converted civilian vessels with improvised weapons. The Hegemony fleet was made up of purpose-built warships with centuries of technological advancement. "Sir," said Major Watson from her engineering station, "our ships cannot match their firepower. If we meet them in direct battle, they will destroy us." "Then we will not meet them in direct battle," Jake said. He began typing commands into the tactical computer. "Send messages to all Alliance fleets. Tell them to gather at coordinates 77 Alpha. We are going to give the Hegemony exactly what they want." "I do not understand," Velthar said. "They want a big battle where they can use their superior numbers and firepower. So we will give them a big battle, just not the kind they are expecting." Over the next 3 days, Alliance ships began arriving at the coordinates Jake had specified. It was empty space, far from any planets or strategic resources. To outside observers, it looked like the Alliance was making a desperate last stand. In the middle of nowhere, the Hegemony fleet arrived exactly as Jake had predicted. They formed their traditional battle formation, a massive wall of ships designed to overwhelm any enemy through sheer firepower. Admiral Korthek of the Vorthan Empire commanded from the center of the formation, confident in his overwhelming advantage. "Unknown vessels," came the transmission from the Coalition flagship. "You are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now and your crews will be treated according to galactic law." Jake activated the communication system from his flagship, a converted scar mining vessel called the Earth's Memory. "This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the Free Species Alliance. Your surrender offer is declined." There was a long pause before Admiral Korthek responded. "Morrison, so the reports were true. A human still lives. More than one, actually, and we remember everything you did to our people. Your species was eliminated because you were a threat to galactic stability. You proved that by starting this rebellion. Surrender now, and we will make your death quick." Jake looked around the bridge at his mixed crew of aliens who had learned to fight like humans. "Admiral, you made one critical mistake." "What mistake?" "You assumed this would be a fair fight." Jake gave the signal, and the real battle began. What the Hegemony thought was the entire Alliance fleet was actually just the first wave. Hidden among the asteroids and debris of nearby space, 3 more Alliance fleets waited in ambush. As the Coalition ships moved forward to engage what they thought was a desperate enemy, they found themselves surrounded on all sides. Ships appeared from behind cover and began attacking from unexpected angles. The Hegemony's perfect formation became a trap. But Jake was not finished. The Alliance ships did not fight like any military force the Coalition had ever faced. Instead of staying in formation, they scattered and regrouped constantly. They used hit-and-run tactics, striking at weak points and disappearing before the enemy could respond. The converted civilian ships proved to be advantages rather than weaknesses. They were faster and more maneuverable than military vessels. Their improvised weapons were unpredictable and hard to defend against. Most importantly, their crews fought with the creativity and determination that Jake had taught them. "Target their command ships," Jake ordered. "Ignore the escort vessels. Cut off the head and the body will die." Alliance fighters, piloted by Ethron, who had learned human aerial combat techniques, swarmed around the massive coalition battleships. They were too small and fast for the heavy weapons to track effectively. Like angry insects, they stung repeatedly at critical systems until the larger ships began to lose power and control. The Molari had contributed ships that could burrow through space debris and attack from underground. The Nereid brought vessels that could function in the radiation fields around damaged ships, allowing them to continue fighting in areas where other species had to retreat. Most devastating of all were the former slaves who now fought as free beings. Every shot they fired carried the anger of generations of oppression. Every maneuver was executed with the precision of people who had learned to survive against impossible odds. Admiral Korthek watched in horror as his superior fleet was systematically torn apart by an enemy that refused to fight by established rules. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his tactical officer. "They are not following any known military doctrine, sir. Their movements are completely unpredictable. It is as if they are making up new tactics as they fight." "That is exactly what they are doing," said Jake's voice over the communication channel. The human had been listening to their radio traffic. "That is what makes humans dangerous, Admiral. We adapt. We improvise. We never do the same thing twice." The battle lasted for 8 hours. When it was over, 2/3 of the hegemony fleet had been destroyed or captured. The rest retreated in disorder, their perfect formations broken and their confidence shattered. Jake stood on the bridge of the Earth's memory, looking at the debris field that had once been the Coalition's most powerful fleet. But he felt no satisfaction in the victory. Too many good people had died today on both sides. "Send medical ships to rescue survivors," he ordered. "All of them, including the Coalition crews." "Sir?" Captain Parker looked confused. "They came here to destroy us?" "They came here because their leaders told them we were the enemy. Most of them are just following orders, same as we were when we served in Earth's military." Jake turned away from the display. "We fight to free people, not to kill them. Never forget that." News of the Battle of Proxima Sanctuary spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communication could carry it. The impossible had happened. The mighty Hegemony Coalition had been defeated by a ragtag alliance of former slaves and rebels. On worlds throughout Coalition space, oppressed peoples looked up at the stars and dared to hope. If the alliance could win such an impossible victory, maybe freedom was possible after all. In the halls of power on Centralist Prime, the Coalition leadership faced a terrible truth. The human they had allowed to survive was not just winning battles. He was winning the war for the hearts and minds of every enslaved species in the galaxy. The real fight was just beginning. The massive fleet of the Free Species Alliance hung in space above Centralist Prime, the capital world of the Hegemony Coalition. Ships from 50 different species filled the darkness between the stars. Skarn mining vessels flew alongside Ethron. Fighters, Molari tunnel ships moved next to Nereid watercraft. At the center of it all was the Earth's memory. Admiral Jake Morrison's flagship. Jake stood on the bridge, looking down at the planet that had ordered the death of his species. 300 years ago, the leaders of this world had signed the order to destroy every human in the galaxy. Today, he had the power to return that favor. "Admiral," said Captain Parker, "all fleet commanders are ready for the final assault. We can begin orbital bombardment on your order." Jake studied the planet below. Centralist Prime was home to over 2 billion beings from dozens of different species. Most of them were civilians who had nothing to do with the decisions their leaders had made. Destroying the planet would make him exactly like the monsters who had killed Earth. "No bombardment," Jake said quietly. "Sir?" Major Watson looked confused. This is the coalition capital. If we destroy it, the war ends immediately. The war ends when we free the last slave and establish a just government, not when we commit genocide. Jake turned to face his officers. We did not fight this war to become the new oppressors. We fought it to create a galaxy where freedom means something. Instead of attacking the planet, Jake activated the communication system that would broadcast his message to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Billions of beings would hear his words, from the richest coalition leaders to the poorest slaves in distant mining camps. People of the galaxy, Jake began, his voice calm and steady. My name is Jake Morrison. I am the last admiral of the human species, and I speak to you today from above the capital world of those who destroyed my people. On Centralus Prime, coalition leaders watched from their emergency bunkers as the human they had feared for so long finally revealed himself to the entire galaxy. 300 years ago, your leaders decided that humanity was too dangerous to exist. They said we were violent and unpredictable. They said we would never fit into their vision of galactic peace. So they murdered 3 billion innocent people and erased every trace of human civilization. Jake paused, letting his words sink in across countless worlds. In the slave camps and factories, workers stopped their labor to listen. In the coalition military bases, soldiers began to question what they had been taught about the rebels they were fighting. But they made a mistake, Jake continued. They killed the people, but they could not kill the ideas that made humanity dangerous. Ideas like freedom, like the right to choose your own destiny, like the belief that no being should kneel before another. On the bridge of the Earth's memory, Dr. Zixtella watched her friend deliver the speech that would change everything. She remembered the scared alien scientist who had awakened a sleeping human, never imagining what that simple act would lead to. Over the past 2 years, those ideas have spread across the galaxy. The Skarn learned them first, followed by the Malari, the Aethron, the Nereid, and dozens of other species. Not because I forced them to, but because they recognized the truth in them. Jake gestured toward the fleet surrounding his ship. Look around you. This alliance was not built by conquest or fear. It was built by beings who chose to fight for something better. Former slaves who became warriors. Defeated peoples who found the strength to stand up again. Different species working together as equals. The message was being received on worlds throughout coalition space. On some planets, government officials tried to jam the transmission, but the Alliance had planned for this. Rebel cells that Jake had trained over the past year activated hidden transmitters, ensuring the message reached everyone. The Hegemony Coalition tells you that their rule brings peace and stability, but what kind of peace requires slavery? What kind of stability depends on oppression? They have given you order, but they have taken away your freedom to choose. In the Coalition bunkers, Director Vexstar of the Vorthan Empire turned to his fellow leaders. We need to strike now, while he is distracted with his speech. Order all remaining fleets to attack. With what ships? Asked Queen Zarthik of the Kretek swarm. Half our military is destroyed or has joined the rebels. The other half is scattered across the galaxy trying to put down uprisings. The energy being that spoke for the Luminary Collective flickered with angry light. How did one human cause so much damage? Our ancestors defeated an entire species of them. Our ancestors fought humans who were divided against each other, Vexstar said grimly. This one united the entire galaxy against us. Jake's voice continued to echo across space. Today I offer the Coalition leadership one final chance to end this war peacefully. Dissolve the hegemony, release all enslaved species. Stand trial for your crimes against billions of innocent beings. Do this, and no more blood needs to be shed. He paused, knowing what the answer would be. Leaders who had held absolute power for centuries would never give it up willingly. But if you refuse, then you force us to take by strength what should be given freely. And when that happens, remember that you chose violence over justice. The Coalition's response came within minutes. Not in words, but in action. Planetary defense systems activated around. Centralist Prime, military bases across the galaxy launched their remaining ships in desperate attacks against Alliance forces. On Centralist Prime itself, something unexpected happened. Jake's words had reached not just the coalition leadership, but the ordinary citizens living under their rule. Protests began in the capital city. Workers walked off their jobs. Civil servants refused to follow orders. The people are rising up, reported Velther from his communications station. We are receiving signals from resistance groups in over 30 major cities on Centralist Prime alone. Jake watched through the ship's sensors as demonstrations spread across the planet's surface. These were not Alliance agents or trained rebels. These were ordinary people who had heard his message and decided they wanted freedom more than safety. "Admiral," said Colonel Harris, "Coalition ground forces are moving to suppress the protests. They are using heavy weapons against civilian crowds." Jake's expression hardened. "Send down the Alliance Marines. Priority 1 is protecting civilians. Priority 2 is securing government buildings and arresting war criminals." The final battle for Centralist Prime was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of orbital bombardment and mass destruction, it was a careful operation to protect innocent lives while removing those in power. Alliance forces moved through the cities like precision surgeons, targeting only military installations and government centers. The coalition's own people turned against them. Police refused to fire on protesters. Military units surrendered rather than fight for leaders who had oppressed them for generations. Within hours, the most powerful government in galactic history collapsed not from external attack, but from internal revolution. Director Vexstar was captured in his bunker, along with most of the coalition leadership. They would face trial for their crimes, judged by representatives of every species they had enslaved. 3 days later, Jake Morrison stood in the ruins of the Coalition Council chambers. The ornate room where his species' death sentence had been signed now hosted representatives from across the galaxy, working to build something new. "Admiral Morrison," said Krex, the former Skarn slave who now served as a planetary governor, "the new Galactic Republic needs a leader. The Council wants to offer you the position of First Chancellor." Jake shook his head. "Thank you, but no. Humans had our chance to lead, and we failed. We were too divided, too willing to fight each other instead of working together. This new government should be led by those who learned from our mistakes." Dr. Zixthala approached him as the council session ended for the day. "What will you do now? The war is over. The galaxy is free." Jake looked out through the chamber's great windows at the stars beyond. "The war may be over, but the work is just beginning. There are still species out there who need to learn that freedom is possible. Still worlds where people suffer under local tyrants. Still work to do." "You sound like you are planning to leave." "The galaxy does not need humans to rule it," Jake said. "But it might need us to remind it that freedom is worth fighting for. That no one should ever kneel before another. That every being has the right to choose their own path." He turned to face his oldest friend in this new galaxy. "You wanted to study humanity to understand what made us dangerous. Did you find your answer?" Zixthala thought for a long moment. "I think I did. Humans were not dangerous because you were violent or aggressive. You were dangerous because you refused to accept that things had to stay the way they were. You always believed that tomorrow could be better than today." Jake smiled. "And now that belief belongs to everyone." Months later, the Earth's memory disappeared into deep space, carrying Jake Morrison and his human crew toward the outer rim of the galaxy. They left behind a transformed civilization, one where former slaves sat as equals with former masters, where innovation flourished again, and where freedom was not just a word but a lived reality. The galaxy had learned that some ideas cannot be killed, no matter how many people die for them. Ideas like hope, freedom,